Welcome to today's episode. We'll explore a profound question scientifically. Is our idea of ourselves reality or an illusion of the mind? We'll talk about the supposed self from the perspective of neuroscience, self-awareness, and we'll also consider other spiritual sages. So, is it illusion or reality? Neuroscience tells us that our identity is a result of brain processes. If you are really who you think you are, if you are who you are, then have you ever wondered if this identity is just a construct of your mind? Have you wondered if what you consider self is just an illusion? And if the ego, the person you think you are, is an illusion, what's left? Is there a real self? If there is a true self and a true nature, you will know for sure that it lies beyond our thoughts and beliefs. We will talk about neuroscience, but also the spiritual path of self-knowledge that teaches that the self, the ego, or the self we think we are, is an illusion, and the only true reality is the awareness of our consciousness. Also, Jesus teaches, whoever wants to save his life will lose it, meaning that the life he wants to save is the false self in the DMN part of the brain that we talk about below. So, what does neuroscience and psychology say about the idea we have of ourselves? Neuroscientists have found that our self, or the idea of self, or the idea of our ego, is the result of processes in the brain and does not exist anywhere else except as an idea in our minds. Neuroscience shows that the ego is a set of brain processes, just like the self-awareness pathway that claims to be an illusion. What is the truth? If we look at our brains, we will see that three main areas in the brain compose the sense of ego with thoughts, memories, recollections, and emotions. The neocortex of the brain, specifically the default mode network, DMN, is the part of the brain that allows us to think complexly, solve problems, and have self-awareness. For example, if you want to make a painting for your room, your neocortex will think about what size and color should it be, where to put it so it fits in with the rest. If it doesn't fit, it will think of other solutions without panicking. The mammalian brain area, the limbic system, is the part of the brain that controls our emotions, memories, and desires. For example, if you see your favorite pizza, this system will trigger excitement, memories, and a desire to eat pizza again. The reptilian part of the brain, or the brainstem, controls basic survival functions, such as breathing, heart rate, and automatic reactions. For example, if something suddenly falls in front of you, without thinking, you will close your eyes or move your hand to protect yourself. This is thanks to the brainstem, which works without you even realizing it. Now we will see how the illusion of the imaginary self is created in these three parts of the brain. It is created then when the brain creates stories of an imaginary self that is created from our experiences, memories, stimuli from the environment, and our emotions. From these, the brain begins to tell your story. You were born there, you grew up somewhere else, and you had this or that experience, or this imaginary guy in our mind belongs to some social group, has plans, desires, and fears. Our brain is a storyteller that creates stories about ourselves, but it also changes our experience to meet our various needs. When we remember something, we don't remember it exactly as it happened. We change details to fit how we feel now. For example, if we see an accident a week later, we may remember different things than what actually happened. Our brains also imagine things that might happen in the future. This can cause us to worry about things that may never happen. For example, one study found that 85% to 90% of the imaginary situations we worry about never come true. We compare ourselves to others. We all compare ourselves to others. This is something we have been doing since the time of our ancestors, but today we do it very often. We also create two selves to better suit us. The real self, how we are now. The ideal self, how we would like to be. The difference between these two selves can make us feel bad. For example, if we think we are not good enough at something, we may change our thoughts to feel better. We also always feel like others are judging us. So if we think someone is going to reject us, we may change our behavior before anything even happens. Our brains get addicted to positive reactions from others. When something positive happens to us, for example, we get compliments or a lot of likes on social media, our brains produce a chemical called dopamine. This chemical makes us feel good and makes us want to continue reinforcing behaviors that give us that intoxicating feeling. But if we are rejected or judged, our brains react as if we are in pain physically. This means that social rejection can be very painful, and that's because it's painful to be rejected by the group we think we belong to. The desire to belong to a social group is strong in our reptilian mind, because thousands of years ago, it was almost impossible to make it through life on your own. Our language, our words, reinforce the existence of the false self. The language we use can make us believe things that are not true. For example, if we say, "I am a failure," instead of "I failed at this plan," we feel that failure is part of our identity. This can make us feel worse. Research has shown that people who use such generalizations, for example, "I am worthless," are more likely to feel sad. Our brain protects and maintains our false sense of self. Our brain tries to protect the image we have of ourselves. For example, we have selective attention. We only notice things that confirm us. If we believe we are good at something, we will only notice the good points and ignore the bad. And the mind's self-fulfilling prophecy. If we believe we are good at something, we will behave in a way that will make us do better. Conversely, if we believe we are ugly or worthless, we will behave in a way that will confirm that view. But what happens when we identify with our false self? When we believe that our false self is our true self, we can have problems like repetitive thoughts. Most of our thoughts are negative, and they are repeated over and over again. This can make us feel worse. 85% of our thoughts are negative precisely because we identify with our false self. Our brain's DMN, default mode network, is constantly trying to protect the coherence of our self-image by anticipating potential threats to it. But there are also the constant worries about the future, sadness about the past, comparisons with others. It is useful to realize that excessive identification with the false self does indeed lead to an excessive number of negative thoughts, and that there are effective methods to reduce this phenomenon as discussed below. There's also the anxiety about what others think. We think others are constantly judging us, but in reality they don't notice us as much as we think. But we also have anxiety about comparisons with others. When we compare ourselves to others, especially on social media, we feel worse about ourselves. So, how do we escape this illusion? To stop identifying with the false self, we must stop comparing ourselves to others, stop taking our thoughts so seriously, and remember that others don't notice us as much as we think. This change can help us feel freer and happier. What does this mean in psychology and neuroscience? It means that the self we think we are is not a fixed, unchanging structure, but a system of brain processes that is constantly changing and evolving. What did Christ say about the false self? Here is the striking thing. Jesus taught us not to cling to the selfish self. Matthew 16:25. Whoever wants to save his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. He called the Pharisees hypocrites because they thought they were better than others by believing in a false self. What does this mean? Life here refers to egoic identity. Christ calls us to abandon our small egoic self to find our true being, which is united with God. Similarly, neuroscience shows that our sense of self changes depending on our memories and reactions. If we don't cling to this identity, who are we really? Neuroscience reveals that the self is a program. Scientists have discovered something amazing. The brain's default mode network, DMN, is responsible for the constant stream of thoughts about ourselves. In a neuroscience experiment and other studies, when participants stopped thinking about themselves, the DMN shut down. This means that the self is just a mental activity, not a fixed entity. Jesus taught this 2,000 years ago, that unless you turn and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 18:3. What did he mean? Young children don't have a self-image yet. They live in the present, not clinging to thoughts about who they are. Does the self function like artificial intelligence, AI? Think of an AI program like ChatGPT. It trains on data. It creates patterns and reactions. It reproduces the same personality based on what it has learned. Our brains work similarly. Every day we learn, store memories, and create an identity based on those experiences. But that doesn't mean our selves are real. The self we think we are is just a thinking program in the brain. Okay, if the self is an illusion, how can we free ourselves from it? And when we are freed, what happens? When you realize, not intellectually but existentially, that you were never yourself, that your sense of personal identity was an illusion, Then everything you thought you were collapses. And in that collapse, your true nature emerges, pure, timeless consciousness, which is not separate from the divine, from the all. This revelation is not a cold understanding, it is total. It is like seeing the sun for the first time after a lifetime in a dark room. And then the tears come naturally, not from sadness, but from a feeling of deep relief, joy, and liberation. It is like waking up from a dream that has held you prisoner for a lifetime, and seeing that you have always been free, always united with the divine. It is a lament and a hymn at the same time. You lament the illusion in which you have been living, but you glorify the truth that is being revealed. And this moment is sacred. It is then that you realize that nothing can separate you from God, from the universal consciousness. I cannot fully describe it in words, because it is something that is experienced beyond them. But if that moment comes, there will be no doubt. You will understand and live it, then you will laugh and cry at the same time. Liberation comes when we say goodbye to our imaginary self. It is what Jesus said. No one can serve two masters, Matthew 6:24. Either we serve our ego, or we surrender to our true nature in God. When you pray, go into your room and shut the door, Matthew 6:6. Similarly, neuroscience claims that meditation weakens the default mode network and reduces identification with the ego. The path of self-knowledge emphasizes observation of thoughts, rather than identifying with thoughts, seeing them as passing clouds. We can practice self-examination by asking, who is thinking these thoughts? We can practice silence and prayer because in stillness, the ego dissolves. When we let go of the ego, we discover our true nature, the awareness of our conscient being, which is a timeless presence in God. So not only the path of self-knowledge, but also both neuroscience and Jesus show us that the self is a mental construct. Are we our ego, or we actually are something deeper? Do this. For 30 seconds, observe your thoughts. If your self were real, wouldn't it be stable and unchanging? If you watch all my videos, you will understand that you are not what you think you are. This will be the first step. Then there will be your true self, which you must recognize like a father, his son whom he has not known for many years. I will not lie. Yes, there is a yoke here in the spiritual life too, because we live in the flesh, but it is gentle yoke. Nevertheless, the slavery in which you are living now is nothing compared to the serenity and love of a spiritual life. In the Gospel of Matthew 11:30, Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Be brave and take that step forward. Don't let your life be wasted living in the illusion that you are something and belong somewhere. You are nothing more or less than a divine presence in the world. You are free and belong nowhere and to no one. Your nature is peace and love, but you don't know it. After you realize your ego is a lie, you will be on the way to self-realization. I am convinced that if you watch all my videos with a curiosity to learn and excitement for the freedom they will lead you to, you will succeed in your search for the truth. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free, as Jesus said. Created by Elias Stasinos. Leave a comment with your opinion, and if you enjoyed the episode, like and subscribe. Until next time, live in the light of your true being.